This morning, a massive news story broke about what may be the most impactful cyber attack on the U.S. we have ever seen. DHS has issued an emergency warning that there may have been espionage going on through our critical infrastructure for 6 months, maybe a year. Now, the AP reports U.S. agencies hacked in months-long global cyber spying campaign. But it's important to point out, they say, in a rare emergency directive issued late Sunday, the Department of Homeland Security's cybersecurity arm warned of an unacceptable risk to the executive branch from a feared large-scale penetration of U.S. government agencies that could date back to mid-year or earlier. That being the case, I don't quite get why they're saying months long. Oh, maybe there is a good reason why they're saying it's a months long, even though the warning says mid-year or earlier. About a month ago, Donald Trump fired Christopher Krebs, who was the first director of cybersecurity infrastructure. He was the first director of the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, or what I'm probably messing the name up. But he ran cyber infrastructure security, etc. Trump fired him, and the media immediately reported that he was fired for essentially for retaliation. That Donald Trump had said there was widespread voter fraud, and this guy came out and said it was the most secure election we've ever had, which is ridiculous. Coming out 2 weeks after the election, they didn't even finish counting in some places. And he was like, most secure, trust me. There's no way he did a forensic analysis on any systems, looked for potential malware or exploits, or did any kind of investigation in 2 weeks. To come out and say that was ridiculously irresponsible. Now, of course, Trump may have actually fired the guy because he was undermining Trump's position. Fine, whatever. But the guy probably should have been fired. I mean, it's extremely irresponsible to claim without evidence that it was the most secure election ever, because that's just ridiculous. It's probably the least. Now, listen, hear me out. Let me tell you something about cybersecurity, why this story is so significant and how it relates to this guy. First, this guy was in charge while all of this was happening. He could not see a 6 month or maybe year-long, mid-year or earlier cyber espionage campaign against the U.S. They didn't notice it. I don't necessarily blame him. Cybersecurity is rather difficult. You see, there's so many ways to exploit a system, to break in and steal things, and it's impossible to plug every single hole. It's like, imagine you have a giant wall and it's mesh, like a mesh wall, all of the little holes everywhere. You can't plug every single one, but you try. Reminds me of that cartoon or cartoons when like the boat springs a leak and they're all trying to put their fingers in the holes. The only way you can put your finger in the hole to stop the water from spraying out into your boat is if you see the water spraying into your boat. You got to look for the leaks, but you can't know where the leak is going to spring from. This guy, it really does seem, based on what we're learning now, this guy Krebs was just trying to essentially disrespect Trump. It was the most secure. That was absurd when I heard it. Because I have a bunch of friends who work in cybersecurity, and I've been, I was heavily involved in the hacker community over the past decade or so. So yeah, plainly irresponsible and ridiculous. Now, the media is saying months-long campaign, because I'll tell you what's coming next. They're going to say, it happened right around the time when Donald Trump fired this guy. It's Trump's fault. Mid-year or earlier. But let me give you the news, and then I'll show you the context of this Krebs guy and what Trump did. They say U.S. government agencies were ordered to scour their networks for malware and disconnect potentially compromised servers after authorities learned the Treasury and Commerce departments were hacked in a months-long global cyber espionage campaign, discovered when a prominent cybersecurity firm learned it had been breached. Quote, this can turn into one of the most impactful espionage campaigns on record, said cybersecurity expert Dmitry Alperovich. The hacked cybersecurity company FireEye would not say who it suspected. Many experts believe the operation is Russian, given the careful tradecraft, and noted that foreign governments and major corporations were also compromised. News of the hacks, first reported by Reuters, came less than a week after FireEye disclosed that nation-state hackers had broken into its network and stolen the company's own hacking tools. Oh, jeez. That's brutal, man. The apparent conduit for the Treasury and Commerce Department hacks and the FireEye compromise is a hugely popular piece of server software called SolarWinds. It is used by hundreds of thousands of organizations globally, including most Fortune 500 companies, and multiple U.S. federal agencies, which will now be scrambling to patch up their networks, said Alperovich, the former chief technical officer of the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike. The DHS directive, only the fifth since they were created in 2015, said U.S. agencies should immediately disconnect or power down any machines running the impacted SolarWinds software. FireEye, without naming any specific targets, said in a blog post that its investigation into the hack of its own network had identified a global campaign targeting governments and the private sector that beginning in the spring had slipped malware into a SolarWinds software update. Neither the company nor the U.S. government publicly identified Russian state-backed hackers as responsible. The malware gave the hackers remote access to victims' network, and Alperovich said SolarWinds grants God mode access to a network, making everything visible. My stars and garters. Talk about a substantial hack. The Treasury and Commerce Departments, DHS, issuing a warning saying it could impact the executive branch and potential Russian hackers. Oh. Or just state actors in general with God mode access to our networks. And this guy had the nerve to come out and say something as dumb as this is the most secure system, election we've ever had. I'm not saying there's a relation between Treasury and Commerce Departments and the election servers. I'm saying this dude was asleep at the wheel when all this was going down. Now, listen. I've got friends who work in InfoSec and work in the hacker community and know this stuff. It's not an easy thing to track down. These things happen. Exploits, they happen. It is so easy to find an exploit. Well, I should say it's relatively easy. And it's almost impossible to stop the exploits. In order to stop them, you have to find the hole first. But typically, if someone finds a way to break into a system, they just sell it for money. They find somebody who's interested in buying it and saying it's called an O-day exploit or a 0-day exploit, something that's been in the public eye for 0 days. That means nobody knows it exists and there's no way to stop it until they do. The good guys are constantly trying to find these exploits and then fix them. The bad guys are trying to find these and sell them. So it is difficult to secure a system. That's why it's so insane. This guy came out and was just saying nonsense without doing any investigations. It puts us at risk to disregard. I'll tell you what's the craziest thing. Knowing how easy it is to exploit systems and how hard it is to protect them. This guy coming out and saying that, I was like, are you nuts? Man, he's inviting the chaos. They say, quote, "We anticipate this will be a very large event when all the information comes to light," said John Hultquist, director of the threat analysis at FireEye. "The actor is operating stealthily, but we are certainly still finding targets that they managed to operate in." On its website, SolarWinds says it has 300,000 customers worldwide, including all 5 branches of the U.S. I'm sorry. Check this out. All 5 branches of the U.S. military, the Pentagon, the State Department, NASA, the National Security Agency, the Department of Justice, and the White House. It says the 10 leading U.S. telecom companies and the top 5 U.S. accounting firms are among its customers. FireEye said it had confirmed infections in North America, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, including in the healthcare and oil and gas industry, and had been informing affected customers around the world in the past few days. Its customers include federal, state, and local governments and top global corporations. This dude should have been fired a long time ago. Good. Trump did the right thing, maybe for dumb reasons, but at least the guy got fired. I certainly hope whoever is there now is sweating bullets. It said that malware that rode the SolarWinds update did not need self-propagating malware, like the NotPetya malware blamed on Russia that caused more than $10 billion in damage globally, and that any actual infiltration of an infected organization required meticulous planning and manual interaction. That means it's a good bet only a subset of infected organizations were being spied on by the hackers. Nation states have their cyber espionage priorities, which include COVID-19 vax development. Could it possibly be that they went after the U.S. military and our agencies? And dare I say, our elections? Maybe. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Monday that Russia had nothing to do with the hacking. Once again, I can reject these accusations, Peskov told reporters. If for many months the Americans couldn't do anything about it, then probably one shouldn't unfoundedly blame the Russians for everything. You see all that Russiagate nonsense for years. And yeah, for months. So Trump fires this guy. I wonder if there's a possibility that the U.S. government actually found out about this massive breach, and there's a real reason Trump fired this guy. Because you have to understand, the government probably learned about these hacks well before the public is, right? Maybe this guy came out and said it was the best election ever because he knew he was about to get fired. Maybe someone gave him a memo and he dropped the load right there in his office desk and said, oh no, the most impactful, most consequential cyber espionage ever on his watch. Brutal. CISA said it was working with other agencies to help identify and mitigate any potential compromises. The FBI said it was engaged in a response, but declined to comment further. If the FBI is already engaged in a response, and the news is breaking now, certainly to go up the bureaucratic chain, they must have known about this a while ago. Imagine there's a threat to the U.S. government. The public is likely not going to learn about it for some time. I think they knew about this for a while, and I wonder if that's why Trump really fired the guy. AP says President Donald Trump last month fired the director of CISA, Chris Krebs, after Krebs vouched for the integrity of the presidential election and disputed Trump's claims of widespread electoral fraud. In a tweet Sunday, Krebs said hacks of this type take exceptional tradecraft and time, adding that he believed that its impact was only beginning to be understood. Congratulations, Captain. Federal agencies have long been attractive targets for foreign hackers looking to gain insight into American government personnel and policymaking. Hackers linked to Russia, for instance, were able to break into the State Department's email system in 2014, infecting it so thoroughly that it had to be cut off from the internet while experts worked to eliminate the infestation. A year later, a hack at the U.S. government's personnel office blamed on China compromised the personal information of some 22 million current, former, and prospective federal employees, including highly sensitive data such as background investigations. The intrusions disclosed Sunday included the Commerce Department's agency responsible for internet and telecommunications policy. A spokesperson confirmed a breach in one of our bureaus and said, we have asked CISA and the FBI to investigate. Austin, Texas-based SolarWinds confirmed Sunday a potential vulnerability related to updates released between March and June for software products called Orion that help monitor networks for problems. We believe that this vulnerability is the result of a highly sophisticated, targeted, and manual supply chain attack by a nation state, said SolarWinds CEO Kevin Thompson in a statement. He said it was working with the FBI, FireEye, and intelligence community. FireEye announced on December 8th that it had been hacked, saying foreign state hackers with world-class capabilities broke into its network and stole tools it uses to promote the defense of its thousands of customers. The hackers primarily sought information related to certain government customers, FireEye CEO Kevin Mandia said in a statement, without naming them. Former NSA hacker Jake Williams, the president of the cybersecurity firm Rendition InfoSec, said FireEye surely told the FBI and other federal agencies how it had been hacked, and they determined that the Treasury had been similarly compromised. The Treasury. I suspect that there's a number of other federal agencies we're going to hear from this week that have also been hit. FireEye responded to the Sony and Equifax data breaches and helped Saudi Arabia thwart an oil industry cyber attack and has played a key role in identifying Russia as the protagonist in numerous aggressions in the burgeoning netherworld of global digital conflict. Mandia said there was no indication they got customer information from the company's consulting or breach response businesses or threat intelligence data it collects. I will stress one more time. FireEye publicly announced on December 8th they must have discovered it well before then, immediately went to law enforcement and said, we have got a massive problem here. So what was the date on that firing? The New York Times reported November 17th. President Trump on Tuesday night, so probably, what was it, the 16th? I don't have the calendar pulled up. Fired his administration's most senior cybersecurity official responsible for securing the presidential election, Christopher Krebs, who had systematically disputed Trump's claims, Trump's false declarations in recent days, blah, 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 New York Times. The announcement came via Twitter, the same way Trump fired his defense secretary. Mr. Trump seemed set off. Well, do we have the tweet from Trump about the firing? Let's see exactly what Trump says. Trump did, I believe. He says the recent statement made by Krebs on the security of the 2020 election was highly inaccurate, in that there were massive improprieties and fraud, including dead people voting, poll watchers not allowed into polling locations, glitches in the voting machines, which changed votes from Trump to Biden, late voting, and many more. Therefore, effective immediately, Chris Krebs has been terminated as director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Trump straight up said he was firing the guy because of his statement. First of all, when it comes to the election, I think it was completely inappropriate for him to come out and say this. Could you imagine if there was, that, look, we've got one of the most divided nations we've ever seen. Almost, well, as some have said, we're almost as divided as we were during the Civil War, 1860s and such. We're divided. The last thing we need is people fanning the flames, and that includes the president himself. But I can't be mad at the president for advocating on his behalf to try and win an election, to fight every legal battle and find any path to victory. I can, however, say, what was the reason this dude came out and had to say this instead of just saying nothing? Unless he launched a formal investigation and did the hard forensic work and followed up on the accusations, he was doing something that was grossly irresponsible. And you know what? That's why he should have been fired. It's dangerous and it's absurd to make these assertions without evidence and without investigation. And it's not like he's the only one who's ever done it. It's not like Trump is all innocent on this either. The point is, this guy was the head with the archived content. Yeah, because the guy's fired. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the first director of the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, sworn in June 15th, 2018. Well, Trump brought this guy in, and it was a mistake, because now we're learning of what may be one of the most impactful cyber espionage attacks on the United States. Of course, you can count on the left to claim it was Russia, and I think they're doing that mostly because the mainstream media wants an excuse to go to war with Russia. They don't want to go to war with China. And I've been thinking about the Russia-China stuff for a second and why this sort of like divide, this dichotomy exists, Russia and China. The right says it's China, the left says it's Russia. Well, think about it. Russia and China don't necessarily get along. They have disputed borders. Or I should say, it's not they have disputed borders, but there's disputed interests near their borders. Russia would certainly like a leg up on China. China would certainly like a leg up on Russia. And the left is anti-Russia and the right is well, actually, I should say this. Most regular people are not big fans of either Russia or China. But the different factions are accusing, either China or Russia of being the big super boogeyman or whatever. There's a simple truth here. And the truth is that China is the real threat to the United States, both in manufacturing, militarily. What is Russia doing? We have some like flybys with like Russia near Alaska and like in Europe and stuff. And yeah, with China, they've extracted the manufacturing base of this country. They've bragged about compromising the incoming president. So I think Russia isn't the biggest problem we have, but they want to go to war with Russia. They want natural gas into Europe. They want to control the flow of resources into Europe, and Russia is in the way, and it's been. You look at who the United States likes to go up against, and it's the countries that don't agree with the petrodollar, the global U.S. oil reserve system, that kind of stuff. You look at Gaddafi, you look at Saddam Hussein, you look at the Qatar-Turkey pipeline. There is a very easily discernible pattern in who gets the boot from the United States. Well, Russia has a natural gas monopoly for the most part going into Europe, and the U.S., though, well, I should say the corporate interests, they want that oil, they want that gas. But they don't care about China stealing our manufacturing base, extracting our manufacturing base, and damaging our economy. Now, I don't know who's responsible for this hack. I do know that we are in a precarious position, this country. We are hearing people call for a divorce between states or cities or whatever you call it. I don't know what you call it. Jurisdictions, I suppose. We've got a global pandemic, a national lockdown. We got another story. Bill Gates now saying that we're going to be locked down for another 2 years. Another 2 years. Just completely destroying the economy of this country. Why? They're burning it to the ground. And then they tell us Russia is the big threat. Things are getting bad, to say the least. At a time when we are more divided than ever, where there's street battles happening across the country, 4 people in critical condition just a couple nights ago, the other night, and an Antifa person shot in the stomach in Olympia in Washington State. Now we're learning that our critical infrastructure, Our cybersecurity infrastructure has been infiltrated potentially for more than 6 months. There's cracks forming in the foundation. It's probably the easiest way to put it. And a lot of people don't understand, the contributing factors that could lead to something like a civil war. If we've got people fighting each other, we're too busy fighting each other, then we're not paying attention to the external threats. And of course, the external threats, like Russia and China both, will start chipping away at those cracks in the foundations to weaken the base, and then ultimately lead us to split and then collapse. And that's the big fear right now. I'm glad this guy got fired. Absolutely. Trump said he fired the guy for coming out about the elections, but I think Trump was right. Based on what we're seeing now, this dude, right under his nose was happening. I'm not going to pretend like it's an easy job and I could do it better. But for this guy to be as boastful and arrogant to say it's the most secure election was just completely insane. This guy was probably sitting there playing video games in his office while all of this was going down, not paying attention, not realizing that the foundation was being hacked away at. We got more. There's a bunch of stories today, my friends. There's this. This is a big breaking news, and while it might not be the most politically relevant to many people, this story's dropping right now, and yikes. But there's more. Bill Gates said 2 years of lockdown. I think I'll cover that. I may cover that at 1 p.m. We've also got Electoral College Day today. Who knows what's going to happen? It's probably going to be uneventful. They're probably going to say Joe Biden. That's going to be the end of it, but we'll see what happens. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.